everyone, my name is Sarah Lavonne and welcome back to my YouTube channel. One of the things that I see online all the time, particularly in the forums, on the TikToks, on the Instagrams, is that I got Pitocin and my labor went from 0 to 100, and it was so much more painful than when I didn't have Pitocin. And so I am going to answer the question here today: does Pitocin make your labor more painful? I'm going to give you both sides. I'm going to give you the science behind it and then some tips along the way. So the answer to that question is not really, but yes and no. Okay. And so let me break this down for you. Before I get to answering that question, I want to explain what Pitocin is in very layman's terms. Now, mind you, if you want to know all about Pitocin, the entire induction process, augmentation process, you learn all of that in the bundle birth class. I'll link it down below. But Pitocin is a synthetic form of oxytocin, which is our natural hormone that causes contractions. And so if we look at oxytocin levels through a normal spontaneous labor, one that goes into labor on your own, you don't have us help you in the hospital as your nurse. And so when we look at those levels, the levels are going to increase throughout labor, right? They're going to cause more painful, more strong contractions. Actually, they actually level out in labor, but your receptors get more sensitive. It's like a whole scientific thing. This point doesn't totally matter, except for when we're comparing oxytocin to Pitocin, which is really the debate that we're having when I answer this question. And so first of all, I want to talk about oxytocin in your body. Oxytocin in your body is considered your love hormone, which is very ironic because it's the one that's going to cause contractions. And so it is released when you feel safe in your body. Now, that's a tip for your labor, because if you're feeling safe and calm and connected and use touch and eye contact and all those things, it's going to help release your natural oxytocin. Another way, little nipple stim, you release oxytocin when you have an orgasm, when you fall in love, when you have those little butterflies, when you make love, when you breastfeed, all those things, okay? There's lots of ways in our body that we create oxytocin, feel-good hormone, but it also causes those contractions. Now, in various cases, whether that be you're in labor, labor stalls, it slows, they may recommend giving you some Pitocin. Okay, Pitocin meaning it is considered a medication, but it's really just a fake hormone, synthetic version of oxytocin. The other instance that they would use this or recommend it is for induction. If you are being induced, whether medically or electively, I talk all about that in the bundle birth class and in other videos in various ways. And so that in that circumstance, you can expect to have some Pitocin. I know people want to avoid it. There's lots of stigma out there about Pitocin. I'm here to get rid of the stigma. I have given Pitocin thousands of times. I have titrated so much Pitocin. I have played the Pitocin game. I have seen it work. I've seen it not work. I've seen all the things with Pitocin. I feel very comfortable with Pitocin. We teach an entire shifting the Pitocin paradigm class on our nurses side of everything that we do. This is a hot topic thing because the majority of people giving birth in the US will be recommended by their medical team to have some Pitocin, let alone have some Pitocin for your labor and birth. You should know about it. So the big question I'm going to answer here is, does Pitocin cause your contractions to be more painful? My first answer is no. And this is why. Because the action on the uterus is exactly the same. So imagine, and I say this in my class, that you have a bunch of doors on your uterus. These are considered Pitocin or oxytocin receptors. They open throughout the end of your pregnancy, and hopefully they're open. That makes your uterus more sensitive to oxytocin levels shifting. At the end of pregnancy, you have an orgasm, you feel a little crampy cramp. That's great. That means your Pitocin receptors your oxytocin receptors are getting more sensitized, meaning there's a lot more that are more available for that oxytocin when it becomes available, particularly for labor. So Pitocin synthetic goes into an IV that you get that then gives you a little bit. They increase about every 30 minutes by 2 milliliters per hour. Okay, milliliters. That's so little baby. Okay, but it goes continuously into your bloodstream to then go to your uterus, fill those little receptors, and go contract. Right now, hopefully your uterus responds to it. But imagine if those doors are closed, it goes to the uterus and it's like, we see nothing. Okay, so your uterus actually needs to be able to respond to the oxytocin or the Pitocin in order for you to have contractions at all. All right. Now, when it goes in and it enters those receptors and it causes a contraction, the exact same action happens on the uterus as it would with oxytocin. Oxytocin mostly coming from our brain, oxytocin goes down, and ideally there's pressure on the cervix, so that prostaglandin helps it to work even better. You learn about that in the class, and then it causes contractions on the uterus, okay? Contractions are the same. It's just a squeezing of the uterus, okay? Goes into your bloodstream versus comes from the brain. Right? The action on the uterus, you cannot really know. If someone says that my labor was so much more painful when they started Pitocin, twofold here. One, they wouldn't actually know what labor felt like without Pitocin. So to compare and say like, oh, I got Pitocin and labor became more painful when that's the goal, versus I was in labor and it increased in strength and frequency of the contractions with oxytocin, there's no possible way to know that labor was more painful one way or another. And pain is a subjective assessment. Now, whether it is or not, you can decide, you're like, no, it definitely was more painful. Great. I'm sure it was for you, but I'm talking from like a scientific way. There's really no way to quantify the pain related to oxytocin versus Pitocin. Now, the other side to this is not only can't you compare the two, is that the expectation when you give Pitocin is that labor, meaning contractions, would get stronger and more painful. That is exactly the same of what we want and expect in a natural labor sense. And so again, can you really know if it was more painful or not? Of course, you give some Pitocin and contractions get stronger, they get more painful. That is the expected response, but that's also what we were hoping for with a natural labor. And natural labor without Pitocin, when it's working fine, it gets stronger and more painful through. So when I compare the experience of observing thousands of labors, some with Pitocin, some without, with an epidural, without. I'm gonna talk specifically without an epidural because you have to see like and feel the actual pain response. Labor looks exactly the same. Exactly. I have seen people who are induced with Pitocin who do it without an epidural. I have seen people who are not induced who go into spontaneous labor, do it without an epidural, okay? Regardless, you can do it without an epidural. Now, what I find is that the moment Pitocin is introduced, something happens in your mind. That all of a sudden you go, well, now this can't be labor. Labor can't be this intense. It's Pitocin's fault. And so instead of understanding that labor would have likely gotten just as painful without Pitocin as well, but because there's Pitocin on board, you sort of have something to blame, which is fine. If that's the way that you cope, that's totally fine. There's no judgment here on that, okay? But when we compare objectively the pain between the two and the action on the uterus, my first answer is that it's the same. And I'm just talking about pain. I'm not talking about the effect on the body and like the benefits of natural hormones and all of that, okay? Just the action is the same. Now here is my other answer to this. And my other answer to this is it might actually be more painful, okay? So understanding that, the other piece, when we understand the hormone of oxytocin, one, it comes from the brain. It also can come from the baby. It can come from various other places. Your natural hormone does pass through the blood-brain barrier of the brain. Meaning, imagine there's like gates or there's like a screen on the window to your brain that like there's this barrier around the brain, protection, where like certain things get in and certain things don't. That's called the blood-brain barrier. All right. And oxytocin is like, yeah, I go into the brain, no problem. And I have other actions on the brain as a result. But Pitocin, those molecules are too big. They get stuck on the screen. They're like, trying to get in there and they cannot. And so it doesn't act on the brain in the same way that oxytocin does. And mind you, oxytocin has a little bit of an an amnesia effect, that it has this like coping side to it where it actually helps you cope. I say in the childbirth class that there's this birth video where she's like, it's not so bad, but it's really awful. And that is like, to me, quintessential oxytocin speaking here, that like it's kind of like, oh, wow, this is so intense, but like, oh, I like love my baby in my body. It's your love hormone, okay? And so is Pitocin more painful? Probably, okay? Not because it makes the action on the uterus any different. The uterus contracts in the same way, maybe a little bit more, so like maybe with less breaks. So that I will say as a caveat to that. But in general, the big mechanism that makes it different is it doesn't actually help you cope. It just causes more sensation. Pitocin's action is to cause contractions. It doesn't help you relieve contractions at all. It only causes the contractions, which hopefully helps make cervical change, make your cervix go away, baby come to the vagina, outside world, into your arms. Whereas oxytocin does all of that plus helps you cope. So my answer really is yes and no. Yes, it is more painful, and no, it's not painful. But this is really where, if you understand the physiology, the science, you can actually understand and begin to parse out the truth behind so much of the information that's out there. That's what I'm here to do. That's what I do in the bundle birth class and all of my classes, all the products, all the things we do. I want to help make it super accessible to you, and also understand that a lot of this stuff is really nuanced. It's not cookie cutter. Anybody that tells you birth is this way, they are wrong. I never say never, never say always with labor and birth, because it is so flex and flow. And so if you want to understand the birth process, if you want to feel empowered through your experience, you want to understand induction, all the medical interventions that could come up, but also what's happening in the body and how do you activate that oxytocin to work the best that it possibly can to potentially avoid Pitocin, I teach you all of that in my bundle birth class, which I'll link down below. I have a VBAC class. There's a coping with labor visualizations, free hospital visualization. You can sample out everything that we do. Check everything out at bundlebirth.com. Make sure you subscribe down below so you never miss a future video. Tell me your favorite part, a little aha moment that you had from this video, and or comment down below. I see all of your comments. I love at least liking them. Sometimes I comment back. And then share your wisdom with each other. And also know that I have support available for you. I do birth debriefs. If you're struggling with like, I had an induction and I really had a bad experience and I really want to process it with someone, I love doing that with you. I am always here for you. We are here for you as a bundle birth community. And so with that, until next time, don't forget to flex and flow, and I will see you soon. Bye. The answer to no, popular. I don't hate Pitocin. I think there's a time and a place for Pitocin. And I think that it's overused. And that's my opinion.